In the past week or two, the WNBA has seen a major escalation in the ongoing conversation about race within the league.
Over the past week or two, race hysteria in the WNBA has somehow reached yet another inflection point.
What initially seemed like a distant, isolated incident of racial tension has rapidly evolved into what could be one of the most heavily publicized and perhaps contrived racism controversies to hit any professional sport in recent memory.
The league is currently in the midst of what really might be the single most contrived racism scandal, certainly in any professional sport.
The league is currently embroiled in a situation where several of its players have come forward, alleging that they've been subject to racial slurs and various forms of racist attacks. This isn't just one or two players making these claims. A significant number of WNBA athletes have voiced their concerns.
Specifically, a bunch of WNBA players have come out claiming that they've been victimized by racial slurs and other forms of racist attacks,
accusing fans of racist behavior, despite the fact that these fans had only recently begun showing interest in the league. This uproar was sparked by comments made by Alyssa Thomas, a veteran player in the WNBA, who has been outspoken about the treatment she and her fellow athletes have faced.
A lot of players are claiming. In other words, they're now accusing the people who have started showing up to WNBA games for the first time in more than 2 decades.
In her comments, Thomas directed criticism towards Caitlyn Clark, a rising star in the WNBA, accusing Clark's fanbase of harboring racial animosity. Thomas argued that some fans who previously supported Clark have now become hostile towards black players, fueling a divisive racial narrative in the league. According to Thomas, the racially charged comments made by these fans reveal deep-rooted biases.
Speaking of relationships, Alyssa Thomas, during the playoffs, she spoke out and condemned race.
Honestly, it's been a lot of nonsense. I think in my 11-year career, I've never...
And she was adamant that this behavior should not be tolerated in any form. The controversy reached its peak during a heated moment in the WNBA playoffs. Thomas had been vocal about her grievances with the league, and in one interview, she expressed frustration over the alleged racist treatment she and other black players had received. This set off a wave of discussions, both within the WNBA community and among fans, about the intersection of race, sport, and media representation. What was supposed to be a simple basketball game turned into a platform for airing out long-simmering frustrations.
I've never experienced the racial comments from the Indiana Fever fan base. We had her face on a serious matter that happened
regarding the systemic issues in professional basketball. The context behind Thomas's comments lies in a broader conversation about the marketing of black athletes and the way the WNBA has been handling race relations. In her view, the league has failed to properly represent its black athletes, instead opting to place more emphasis on white players like Caitlyn Clark. This wasn't a baseless accusation, but a culmination of years of perceived inequities in the spotlight that certain players receive. Thomas has argued that players like Clark have been promoted primarily due to their race, and not necessarily because of their abilities on the court, a claim that sparked intense backlash across the league.
You women out there, y'all petty, man. Hey, LeBron, you're 100% right on these girls hating on Caitlyn.
The incident that kicked off the most recent wave of controversy occurred during a matchup between the Connecticut Sun and the Iowa-based team, where Clark and Thomas were caught up in a fiery moment. Clark was involved in a physical altercation on the court with another player, D. Carrington, which led to accusations that Clark had poked Carrington in the eye. While Clark maintained that the eye poke was accidental and unintentional, her critics, including Thomas, seized on the moment as an opportunity to make accusations about racial biases.
Clark, y'all petty, girls. I expect men to be petty because we're the most insecure group in the world.
Oh, you are.
Y'all should be thanking that girl for getting y'all...
For Thomas, this wasn't just about a single play or an isolated event. She saw it as part of a larger pattern that highlighted the inequalities in how black players are perceived in comparison to their white counterparts. Thomas pointed to the fact that when black athletes like her show intensity and passion on the court, they're often labeled as aggressive, while white athletes like Clark receive the more positive characterization of competitive or driven.
Careful when you say like the Fever fans, because I don't think it's the Fever fans. I think it's the people that wanted Caitlyn Clark to be a certain type of way and they thought that she was, and so they became Caitlyn Clark fans, assuming that. and then...
This double standard, Thomas claimed, is a reflection of deeper racial prejudices within the sport. In her criticism of Clark's rise in popularity, Thomas suggested that the WNBA's decision to focus on Clark was not due to her skill, but rather because of her race. She implied that Clark's marketing was an attempt to placate a predominantly white fan base, leaving black players like herself on the margins. According to Thomas, this disparity created an unfair advantage for white players, who she felt were marketed as the face of the league, while black players, despite their accomplishments, were often sidelined. However, Thomas's argument left many wondering if it was truly about fairness or if it was simply a matter of jealousy. After all, Caitlyn Clark had earned her spot at the top through hard work, incredible talent, and consistently jaw-dropping performances. She wasn't being handed a platform because of her race.
Her face on a serious matter that happened in this world, and it's unacceptable, honestly.
She was getting attention because her skill was undeniable. Despite her rapid rise in popularity, Clark's detractors refused to acknowledge her achievements, focusing instead on questioning the motives behind her success.
Honestly, it's been a lot of nonsense. I think in my 11-year career, I've never experienced the racial comments from the Indiana Fever fan base.
What sets Caitlyn Clark apart is not just her undeniable talent, but her ability to handle the pressure that comes with being the center of attention. Unlike some of her peers, Clark has chosen not to get involved in the off-court drama and controversies that have often distracted other players. Her approach has been simple. Let her game speak for itself.
Careful when you say like the Fever fans, because I don't think it's the Fever fans. I think it's the people that wanted Caitlyn Clark to be a certain type of way and they thought that she was, and so they became Caitlyn Clark fans, assuming that.
This has only endeared her to fans who appreciate her focus, her professionalism, and her clear passion for the sport. For Alyssa Thomas, however, the spotlight seems to be something she has struggled to share. She has long been a competitive force on the court, but it's clear that she feels frustrated by what she perceives as her lack of visibility compared to Clark. Despite her talent, she has not received the same level of media attention or commercial success. Instead of focusing on improving her game or working with the league to address the disparities she sees.
Like the WNBA wasn't ready for what Caitlyn Clark was going to bring with.
Thomas has chosen to criticize other players, including Clark, for the attention they've received. This, however, does little to foster positive change. In her comments, Thomas accused the WNBA's decision-makers of perpetuating a marketing system that discriminates against black athletes. She suggested that the league has failed to properly elevate players like her, despite the fact that many black athletes have made significant contributions to the league's success. While there may be merit in her critique of the league's marketing strategies, Thomas's blame seems to be misplaced. Caitlyn Clark is not the architect of the league's promotional campaigns. The responsibility lies with the league's higher-ups, who ultimately decide which players to promote.
Oh, it's headed in a great direction, but nah, we don't want fans that are going to degrade us and call us racial names.
Furthermore, Thomas's critiques of Clark and the league's marketing practices don't help advance meaningful discussions about race in the sport. Instead of directing her frustration towards the structures that create these inequities, Thomas has chosen to criticize other players who are simply benefiting from their own hard work and talent. This is not only unfair to Clark, but also unproductive for the larger conversation about race and inequality within the league.
I mean, we already see what's happening in the world and what we have to deal with in that aspect. And, you know, we come to play basketball for our job and it's fun, but...
Perhaps more troubling than Thomas's critiques of the league's marketing is the suggestion that players like Clark are somehow complicit in perpetuating racial disparities.
On to Caitlyn Clark and then use her as, like, I guess, like this fuel to be able to be the way that they...
This notion of reverse racism, where black players are held to a different standard than white players, doesn't hold up under scrutiny. Clark, who has faced her fair share of criticism throughout her career, has never shied away from the challenges of being a public figure. She has consistently proven herself to be a talented and dedicated player who deserves every bit of the recognition she's received.
To be done, whether it's, you know, them checking their fans or this league checking, there's no time for it.
Moreover, it's important to note that while Thomas has been vocal about the need for change,
I want to go to work every day and have social media blown up over things like that. It's uncalled.
Her own actions have contributed to the creation of unnecessary tension. By targeting Clark and blaming her for systemic issues in the WNBA, Thomas is only dividing the league further.
People should not be using my name to push those agendas. It's disappointing. It's not acceptable. But yeah, I mean, this league is
Instead of building unity and fostering collaboration between players, she has chosen to engage in a public feud that distracts from the larger issues at hand. The WNBA needs to focus on improving conditions for all its players, not pitting them against one another. There's also the issue of how these public disputes affect the fans. For the most part, the WNBA has been working hard to improve its visibility, raise its profile, and build a loyal fan base.
League I grew up admiring and wanting to be a part of. Like, some of the women in this league were my biggest idols and role models growing up and helped me want to achieve this moment right here that I get to play in every...
Controversies like this only serve to detract from those efforts, feeding into negative narratives that don't serve anyone's best interests. If the league is to continue growing, it needs to find ways to handle these disagreements internally without allowing them to spill out into the public eye and distract from the game itself. Despite these challenges, Caitlyn Clark's rise to stardom is a testament to her dedication and hard work.
To be the representation of their racism and like their view on the world. And
While some may try to tear her down, Clark's focus remains unshaken. She continues to play the game with grace, skill, and maturity. Her silence in the face of criticism only highlights her character. She knows that engaging in these petty disputes only detracts from the work she's doing on the court. By refusing to get dragged into the controversy, Clark proves that she's not just a star player, but a true professional. In the end, the WNBA faces a crucial crossroads. The league must decide whether it will continue to focus on elevating players who are pushing the sport forward, like Caitlyn Clark, or if it will become bogged down by internal rivalries and distractions. The future of the league depends on its ability to unite its players, foster positive competition, and address systemic issues in a meaningful and constructive way. If the league can manage to do that, it will thrive. If not, the damage done by public feuds and misplaced grievances may be difficult to undo.